Better music so this can be alive. What, you guys didn't like my singing? Melissa, Jeff, are you ready for some prospecting live?
As long as you stop singing, then I'm ready.
There's a reason why I'm not. I don't do that for a living.
I'm here for the Mambo number 5 remixes all day long, Nick. Let's go.
I'll try to do better next time. Everyone, get in the chat here. Let us know that you're watching and let us know what we can help you with. So today, we are going to map the earthquake. I know, I feel like it's going to be like a flood of natural disasters as I explain this. Hopefully, it's not in your selling life, but hey, we've all been there. I've been there, and we got two incredible sellers with me here today. Melissa, that's working at the rocket ship deal and making it happen, and Jeff, that comes from the same background as me, was a management consultant and was crazy enough to go and make the turn to seller, and we'll see what we've learned in the process.
Still getting my head checked on that one.
I completely understand. And so today, guys, in the spirit of getting out of theory, what I thought we would do is let's go and give everyone an assignment. And if you guys are open to it, I'll say that people can send it to you for review or feedback, but you don't have to if you don't want to. That's no problem. But one of the things I've learned through all my experiences in sales is that doesn't matter how many books you read, doesn't matter how many how many things you do until you start doing the work. So in this exercise, what we're going to be doing is basically giving you the roadmap into an account. And it's based on everyone and how you sell, the value drivers that make hopefully your company exist, because it should have a reason. And that way, whenever you're going to prospects, they understand why change. They understand why now, and they really understand why you. And so as we're going through this, we're going to go and prompt you with different things to think about. We're going to go and talk about and we each have a different way of looking at this. That's why I was so excited to do this, is that we're going to go and bounce ideas off each other and hopefully frame it in a way that everybody listening understands. So if you have questions, get in the comments and I'll make sure they get addressed and I'll pull them up. But at the end of today, your goal in this hour is to actually have an earthquake map for yourself. So I'm not just going to kind of ping pong it off here. Jeff, if you don't have an earthquake map, before we go and tell everybody exactly what it is, what might be some of the symptoms that this is missing?
Yeah, and this is something I think I see a lot of times with either younger sellers or younger SDRs, where you spend a lot of time on the front end prospecting an account, an ABM account, or I should say an account you're trying to do ABM to. But what often happens is if you don't have the right players or you don't understand how the different folks interact, just because maybe you don't understand their titles, it's not intuitive. It's a new structure you've never seen, because there are lots of corporate structures out there. There are different names for a lot of the same things. You can spend a lot of time and effort targeting the wrong people, sending your messaging to the wrong people. And no matter how good your content, your messaging is, if it's completely irrelevant, it's going straight in the trash bin. Nobody's going to take the time and go, this actually is Sue's responsibility. I'm going to forward it over to her because I'm sure she's going to love it when I send a cold outreach email, and I'm going to connect you to the right person.
Well said. Melissa, what would you add to that? Or if you want to go and challenge it, give it a poke, go for it.
No, I think it's very true. You need to make sure that when you're shooting, you're shooting with aim and you're really trying to hit. But understanding how they interact, I thought was very key from that, because not everyone is going to, of course, you might send it to the wrong person, sure, but you're trying to analyze and understand your pain that you solve for and who's really feeling that pain. And then who are the people around that person to help make that role or job a little bit easier. Hello.
Zoe says that if you guys send some cold outreach, she will not go and condone the cuddles with you. So it's gotta be high value. Hey, Zoe, good girl.
True.
But
It
you
has
know,
high value, yeah.
I was thinking about this from like my Road Warrior days, and I was thinking about when you'd go in blind, like you really had nothing. Because when I started, I feel like it makes me sound so old. God. But I had to go to the library to get a lot of information.
Oh wow.
Well, but it was because I was working in rural areas and they were still using paper file systems. And so you had to really think about how you were getting that information before, so you weren't going in blind. Hey, Riley. And I remember going to the smoke pits in the back of shops to go in. Sometimes I'd bring donuts and coffee, maybe a bottle of whiskey, and then you'd go and ask your questions, and you kind of get an understanding of the ebb and flow of how that business worked. Because from the outside looking in, you couldn't see. I think that's the biggest thing that's changed between when I started and post-COVID, is you really have no excuse not to have a hypothesis going in. And I think you do yourself an extreme disservice by not doing that, because if you work for an established company, they've done trial and error. They should have some clues as to where you should start. But if we don't have a map of how those clues are perceived by the buyer, buyer, prospect, or student, we are making this job truly a hustle project. And that's, everybody knows my story. That's what happened to me. So how would you guys describe the earthquake? In your own words, when you do your account mapping, how would you describe it both from segmentation, so top level, like when you're working a whole category, versus an individual account? Melissa?
Yes. So, of course, you're going to be targeting probably a department. So for me, I'm more focused right now at deal looking at finance, looking at, okay, now that I have my giant finance bubble, right? Who is even more strategic or even more specific that's experiencing the exact challenges that I solve for? So let's take the finance bubble and now let's break it down into the different roles and responsibilities and who is actually touching my product, my project, my product. Because you're going to have people who are touching your product if you're selling tech. And then you're going to have people who are just, collecting the information from the product. And then you're going to have people that are above the product that aren't really going to be touching it, but they need to make sure that it's either saving the money or that they're getting some sort of ROI behind it, or there's some sort of benefit because they were the ones that said yes to it a while ago, or they're the ones who are going to say yes to it. So you have to think about when you're mapping the earthquake, okay, how does my product align with the person who's touching it? How does it align with the person who's receiving information from it? And then how does it align with the person who is, overviewing all of it, and a sense of like security that this product is going to make the rest of their team's lives easier and less headaches for me up here. And we're either saving money or making money or something like that. So definitely understanding that you're not just targeting one person, you're looking at an entire department, but what does each level and what do they each care about your product or the pain that you're solving for, and then how does that fit in, and then how do they interact with each other? So when we say mapping the earthquake, like it starts with the epicenter, right? And then who else feels that effect? And the people on the outside aren't going to be feeling it as much as the people on the inside touching the product, but they're still feeling the impact of it and they see the damage that it's doing on the inside. So how do we, not to make it more catastrophic of this earthquake, but like how do we make the pain front and center so that way the people on the outside who are actually buying it can see how painful this is and catastrophic this earthquake is from the very epicenter of it. So I love the earthquake mindset of it. I think it's super smart, just the way that we discuss it, but at a glance, that's how I think of it. I'll pass it on.
I'm loving all this alignment. Your $20 is in the mail. And that was really, The one thing that Morgan had said to me yesterday, it was funny because the way you were explaining it is somebody had said to him, what are people saying they hired your product to do?
Mm.
And as I was explaining, you were explaining, I was like, oh, that fits so well with that, what Morgan told me. I can't remember if it came from a book or where it was, but like, what are people hiring your product or service to do? And who is getting the reports? And who is getting fired if it doesn't happen? Only $20, man. Riley's already got negotiating in the DMs for you. Jeez. Geoff, what do you think? Would you go and challenge that at all, or is there anything you would add?
I mean, I think Melissa nailed it. So I could just compliment a little bit on top of what she said. But I think, you know, where I might have traditionally started a couple years ago was like looking across my territory. Who's the biggest or who's, got the biggest potential? In my case, I'm selling to sales leaders, sales organizations, who's got the most sellers. Where I think I've shifted that, and then this speaks to what you were talking about, Nicholas, was like they've tried things, like they have a status quo. And it's not just like their existing problem. It's the fact that, they've tried to solve those problems, probably with internal resources, potentially with external resources. And I need to be able to understand what they've tried and why it hasn't worked yet. And I think one of the ways you could, maybe categorize that a little bit is, where do we have the possibility to help them start to think a little bit differently around that? And so in like, classic challenger vernacular, I would call that reframe potential. But essentially it's coming down to, they are doing something. There's a reason they're doing it today. And there's a reason that they've tried to change it and it hasn't worked. And to Melissa's point, that touches all sorts of different people in different ways. And so if I can take a look, and this is where, thank you for LinkedIn Navigator, if I can take a look and start to be able to understand how those folks interact, then I can start to form a hypothesis around like, what that likely is and where I might be able to help them start to think differently about their existing challenges.
Yeah.
Amen. I'll start with, I put it in 4 circles. And so how I originally came up with this metaphorical disaster zone is I found that a lot of when I first started, I could go to a VP in whatever function, and it was either I had to work with the VP or their executive assistant because they were the ones doing the research, they were the one doing the work. And at the end of the day, they made the decision, they owned it. What I noticed happened in the past 5 years is it's now a democracy because nobody wants to own the blame solely. And so they want to go and tap into the resources of different functions to try to spread that blame out so no one person gets the finger, no one person gets fired.
Yeah.
And so I found that it came down to 4 circles. So it came down to coverage. So what does your product cover? What functions, what processes, whose jobs to be done does it cover?
Now I'm taking notes.
Yeah. No problem. Access. I think that is a huge compliment. I looked up.
The recording. We could probably get the slides too.
Can't help it. You have to write it down.
Oh, you guys are my favorite. We'll have to do this more often. Next is access. Who specifically do you need access to mobilize this? Think of it like access to champions. Don't put seniority to it. So you get coverage of the whole product, and now we're going smaller, and who do you need access? The third ring is who needs the insight? Who pulls the intelligence from this to make decisions? And the last circle is who owns the strategy? I really hope to God there is one person, because the amount of times I've done this exercise and found out that it wasn't someone and it hurt, made for a really ugly sales process. But when you think about these different layers, now you can map out how it ripples out from that main point.
Yeah.
And that's where the impact is felt. And the beauty of this is it changes the way you prospect from spamming to research in action. Because what we just mapped out turns into assumptions. Because now we're looking at these different impacts and we're actually looking at, so how does that problem come up? What are the signs and symptoms for each one? How does that solution show up? What did we assume about the solution in the first place? Or the category thereof, right? And everything in companies and investment. So what does that look like for an ROI? And the one that I see get missed more often than not, and I think that's why a lot of these big deals are falling apart, is the reality of implementation. What did we assume was going to happen to see that full value promised? And why I call this research in action is it's proofs in the pudding. When you're going out and you're mapping your earthquake, you're taking that minimum viable segment, the smallest one you possibly can, and you're going out like a detective preparing a case to go to court. And as some people may know, the only thing you bring to court is written documentation and observable facts. Nobody cares about your opinions. Those will come in later, but first you have to start with the facts. So if we do this and we start prospecting, now we get to go and talk to the people who might have the answers. We become a journalist. Somebody can report on it.
Wow, who could that be?
And so, Melissa, the one thing I wanted to go and kind of pass off is, what was the difference between getting a great brief?
Getting a great what?
Like a brief, like when you were reporting. What was the difference between somebody handing you off like a great handoff versus crap? Like just paint us like black and white. What were some of the differences? I think this is really critical because whether you write it yourself or you get it from marketing, if it's not enough, I think it's important to know.
Yeah. It's really interesting because there's so much that journalism, at least when it comes to prospecting and doing the research, that aligns, because when you're a journalist, you're reading all the facts, you're analyzing it, and then you're telling a story about it. And so it's the same thing when you're prospecting, is being able to, collect these facts. What is it that I can actually see? And then what is the story of these facts, and what's the sequential order of it, and who's being impacted by it? It becomes this whole thing. So it is true. And I'm going to bring it back to sales as well. But like when I was a journalist, and when I was doing news reporting, like, when you have a good story and when you have a story that is just like, there's nothing to it, there's nothing to it. You do additional research, maybe you can't find it. You start calling to bring people in for interviews, and like nobody's able to show. The story just gets beat up. And so just like when you're prospecting, if you're unable to prove your hypothesis or unable to identify a pain, then maybe you need to find a different account or a different target to go after. So it's the same thing with journalism, where it was like, okay, is this really the right story that I want to tell? Or do I need to go find something else, find something better? And so the same thing with sales is like, okay, I have my whole list of accounts. From the outside view, if I can really identify a pain and really start telling this story and really start evoking emotion and mapping that earthquake and getting all these people to feel the impact, then they're going to be interested in learning more. But if I can't identify that from, the research that I've done so far, then let me pause on this account. Let me move on to another and find a more stronger story, a stronger play, because you also only have so much time. So, maybe that one that you couldn't really map out as well, maybe save that account for an event, or save that account for another reason to reach out. But like, go after the true pain, the true earthquakes that you can map out, and go after that first.
I really wish that I had a soundboard for like applause, or like some like whist, like, yeah. That'll be my next thing. And I wanted to go and pass it off to Geoff too. Like, when you read analyst reports, how did you know there was a weak case? Like, what are the, because everything is an investment. And you have to think, like, even hiring headcount, like hiring people, is an investment. And if I spend $100,000 and I'm not getting $100,000 back, this is when headcount gets reduced. So when you were in management consulting and you pulled an analyst report, how did you know that it was a safe bet? How did you know that it was a worthy investment to prioritize this quarter?
Yeah. So first of all, public companies are a wealth of information. 10Ks, earning call transcripts, they're a gold mine. But they can be challenging to understand how to use, especially for folks who are starting out their careers. If you don't have anybody on your team that can do coaching, reach out to me. I've got a couple posts of like how to get the information you need in like 15 minutes, not 2.5 hours, because it's really easy to get lost in that information.
That's the truth.
If you know what to look for, then there are patterns here, and you know what sections to leverage. You can quickly start to understand. So, again, my case, I'm looking at sales and marketing work. I'm looking at go-to-market spaces, but this applies for others as well. In an annual report, you can quickly break down the business segments, and then you can quickly understand what the risks are, because they literally talk about the risks in the annual report. And then if you go to the latest earnings call transcript, you can quickly understand, based off of either the CEO's comments or the CFO's comments, how those different business units are performing. And so, to your point, if I see an organization that's talking about exponential growth and hiring, I might think that might be a play, but at the same time, they also might be focused in a world with cheaper capital on M&A. That is not generally going to be like my best spot. So I might deprioritize somebody who's focused on M&A, because there's a lot of change going on there, and it's unlikely that I'm going to get their attention because they're not focused on organic growth. But the second you see those other terms, because I know folks who want to do organic growth need to sell better, then all of a sudden that's setting off alarm bells. And so if you think about, you work back from what your product or solution does, in the case of Melissa, we're talking about like more of a SaaS product. In my case, it's more of a professional services product, but in the end, there's an outcome and we're solving a pain. And we need to be sharp on that so that we can learn to detect when folks are trying to go out and do this. That's why it was so great when you guys had Jordan on the podcast recently. Job postings and finding pain through job postings, another great resource. But you need to be, as the seller, you need to be sharp on what are those couple trigger words or ways that folks are talking about, things they're trying to accomplish that lead back to what you can help them with.
And people listening, as you could hear when Geoff was talking, there's pattern recognition. If you're worried about having this, it just comes with time. It takes practice. This is why when you first start, it is really good to put the hours in and focus on parts of the sale, parts of the earthquake, to build up that pattern recognition, because you start to notice things. I always joke, it's like the beautiful mind, and it's like, don't you see it? It's right there. The writing's on the wall. But it's an earned right. And as sellers, this is why we get paid well. And people that say that they don't deserve it are full of shit, and they're probably getting paid what they're worth. So this takes time. It takes time to get there. And there's an interesting thing in behavioral psychology called the look and leap method. And so it comes from the secretary problem. Now, the secretary problem is once you're trying to hire a secretary and you have to do it fast. But every time you interview a secretary, you can't go back. So how do you make a good hire? So when they actually crunched the numbers, it was give or take, depending on the pool, 37%. So you've seen enough based on the value that you're going to go and look at, or the time frame, 37% of the way in. You have enough patterns to know what good looks like.
Yes, I love that.
But what got really interesting is when you had one data point, one piece of proof that was undeniable that you could find at scale, it goes up to over 57%. That's what we're doing today. Because when you map the earthquake and you find those pieces, you win more often than not. Okay, so lots of theory, lots of talk. Let's switch. Geoff, would you like to either share your screen or discuss an account, and let's map it together? Everyone watching, there's no perfect format for this to look like. You can just have like ring 1, 2, 3, 4 and just build it out that way. Or you could do, as I was talking about, coverage, access, insight, strategy, or investment, because the person that owns the strategy is also going to be making the investment. And now, as I've learned earlier this week, I have to click this button so that we can see the screen. I had an oops, but we we move on. Actually, this one probably was better.
Good
So
question, Nicholas. Are you doing, when you think of coverage, access, insights, and strategy, if we were to draw that, because obviously I'm drawing pictures, um, and if we have the epicenter of the earthquake, would you put coverage at the epicenter and then strategy on the outside of the earthquake?
I
Or,
love that you asked this question because it is so critical. It's actually reverse.
oh my gosh, I have to redraw it.
Yeah, you're actually reversing into it because we're starting with the end in mind. What do
Okay.
we need to cover? And then you're going in, because at the epicenter is the investment. There, it's the strategy. It's the person that bought the status quo. And even though you would think they would feel it the most, it's the outside ring that feels it the most. But most people start with the inside and they miss everything in the process. So you have to work your way in. Think of it like a journey from outside working your way in. And of course, as sellers, we're the guide. So who's our hero on our tale?
Mm. Okay.
Okay. Tell us about, is it must be, I'm guessing Ignite. If I am totally out to lunch, then somebody's more than welcome to correct me.
Nope, you got it right. So this is actually a company that I was targeting a little while back, so I'm trying to catch up with my pieces. But essentially, you're talking about cloud SaaS solution. They've got some amazing product market fit. When I looked at some independent like ratings in terms of what they were trying or what folks thought of their solution. But what would you like to know, Mr. Nicholas?
How would you think about this as an earthquake? So going through the lens of Challenger, going through the rings, what is the journey that you want to go on with this customer? Why this customer in the first place? Why are they on the list?
So why are they on the list? So when I was looking through, there were a couple things that called out to me. One, there was some intent data from some of the different intent sources that there was some interest in my company in terms of active engagement, things like that. We have a number of customers that have similar situations where you've got a company that's had really strong growth for the past 4 or 5 years that is in a similar space in terms of the problems they solve, and oftentimes that translates to similar challenges that their sellers are facing. And so in terms of mapping the earthquake, the other thing that I noticed when I started to research was they weren't perfect. There were still some challenges. So one of the challenges that I highlighted from my research was if you go to their rep view page, what you'll notice is there are a lot of really solid ratings, but one of the ratings that's a little bit lower is in terms of professional development. And so that's, for the folks who don't know RepView, I would strongly suggest you go there. But essentially it's Glassdoor for sales organizations and can provide a lot of really great insight if you're looking for a job, if you're considering a change, but also if you just want to understand what's going on in a sales organization. And so
What does that signal to you then? Well, as an ROI standpoint, so if somebody's owning that investment, what's the value driver? Why do they care if people don't like it or if they don't see potential in the company? They could just hire another cog in the wheel and keep, cheap and keep moving. Why does that matter?
Yeah, well, the cost of turnover isn't so cheap. I feel like that might have been a leading question, and you might know a thing or two about that.
Well, I think this one's interesting too, because on the surface, yeah, and like they had really great advisors through like Google Ventures and a couple of really strong venture companies, which adds a lot of credibility having them on here. But on like off this like a surface skim, this doesn't tell me anything. But it would be interesting if you went down to if you go close that one for us, Geoff.
Sure.
Thank you for highlighting that. Go down to insights. And
that has since changed.
it's good to know, right? This is a new feature. If you have Enterprise for Sales Navigator, it'll tell you based on if they're sending ads, if you're sending in-mails, if you're following your company. There's different triggers. It's not really intent. That's a pretty fluffy use of the word intent. It's more interest. But if we go look at insights, we'll keep going down. You're on intent. There we go. Okay, so they've been growing. And if you go to distribution and headcount, so in the past 3 months, they've increased marketing and sales, so there is a push for revenue generation. Did we look at possibly the new hires or job openings? Okay, yeah.
So you can see, to your point, that aggressive plan of growth via new headcount has slowed down significantly.
So one thing I would want to know on this one is because they have a 200% increase in product management, is sales just the scapegoat of poorly run product and innovation? Is because they're prioritizing the wrong things on the roadmap? So what are those signs and symptoms that there is a revenue issue? Like I know most companies right now on average are down 40 to 70% in pipeline. What did you see in the jobs? What was their menu of must-haves?
In terms of
Were they? So I always look at it like whenever something you're hiring, it's a menu of what you want, what you're trying to fix in your company. It kind of mirrors what you're hoping to get. Did you happen to look at the jobs to see what the description?
Their job postings?
Yeah, like are they more inbound? Are they building a more emotion that needs to be bought? Is it more outbound? Is it a more of a motion that needs to be sold? And if it needs to be sold, is it at a high enough ACV where it actually makes sense for unit economics for sales and that full go-to-market strategy? Because this is where I always find it interesting when you're mapping the earthquake. Is like, or are you solving a symptom or are you solving a root problem? Did we go deep enough? And when I see product management that goes on there, it tells me that it could actually go down to the product line, or if it's product, and then they also have engineering, but engineering went down, it could be that they've already created a new product, or they're focusing on prioritization, not building out roadmap. And like actually what Melissa had said earlier is like, what is the narrative that's going through this person's head? What is the story they tell themselves? And so all you're trying to do with mapping the earthquake is right, make that story. So I was just curious in jobs, what are they prioritizing right now? What is worth spending the money?
Yeah, and I think what you're calling out is interesting because if you look at the second line right there, it's proactively prospect, right? And so what that tells me is they're looking for folks who can not only manage inbound demand, but go out and create it. And if there's one thing we know about selling enterprise software solutions, creating demand is not a, one cold call, set up a meeting and demo and close. Like these are going to be long and involved sales cycles. But to your point, I think using the job descriptions, we can start to formulate a hypothesis here that this company likely had stronger inbound demand. I see. So the issue, I see. The problem with I'm not showing you guys what I'm looking at.
That's okay.
Hang on a second.
I did that earlier this week.
My screen.
I get it.
And see if I can do it better.
It's okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, audience.
Melissa, what are you as we're talking about this in your experience? What is jumping out at you that you would want in your earthquake of things to go and prioritize to find out while prospecting, to validate?
Yes, I also am someone who goes on Glassdoor to read job reviews, but not just like the description. I focus more on like what are the reviews of what the employees are saying. So I'll dive into a little bit of that while this is very different from what you were showing us before.
Yes.
So I was clicking around here the whole time thinking you guys should see my screen, and then I came back and realized it. So sorry about that.
Is this an AE?
So essentially, just so folks can keep up, like, one, I think it's always valuable to go to the leadership page to understand, in my case, I'm zeroing in on Stan and things like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and take a look at their open roles. In this case, I want to understand, what they're trying to get out of their account executives. And then the very second line is that they want to proactively prospect. And so if we start to dig in, that's where I was developing my hypothesis, and I can understand why it might have been hard to follow along. So I appreciate everybody's patience. But I think, if we look back at some of the things that we've learned so far about this account, is they had very aggressive hiring of sales folks over the past 2 years. That has slowed down. Even though they have open job postings, they're not hiring nearly as aggressively. That's a common theme we're seeing across the marketplace right now. And so then you've kind of got two choices there. You can either, if you're going to win, you can either sell more deals and bigger deals, or you can try to feed the funnel with more opportunities. It looks like they might be leaning towards the second one. And that's actually a much more costly and difficult endeavor, because you're just trying to run the machine harder, if you will. And it's one of the hardest skills that are out there. And so there might be the opportunity to start to, as we talked about earlier, reframe their thinking around, is our issue that we need to just keep the same win rate and pump more opportunities through? Or do we need to take a look at what it is that we're doing within a sales cycle and potentially change some of those skills and behaviors so that we win more of the opportunities we're not winning today?
I love that. And that is a great thing just to throw into a quick sentence, right? And then it's like, okay, in my coverage, in my earthquake, who can I go talk to? Where can I go validate that? And if you actually go and stay on this page, but if you go to their press releases, they also just released a big new search function. It might be the reason why they let engineers go, is because they just finished development. And so I'm wondering if now is the second part of the movement. They've done their product development I think it was on the very bottom. There's press releases.
It was
I never go to the top. I always go to the very bottom.
Okay.
And it's in the bottom. They'll say press releases under news.
Mm-hmm.
And so April 28th, enhances search, adds new features to AEC package. So that would be what architecture, engineering, and construction companies, which is a big focus. So I wonder if they're trying to set up beachheads in certain high blue collar areas or high growth areas where the GDP is increasing in real estate and probably commercial major projects.
I just want to pause everyone for a second, just because the thinking out loud here, this is part of prospecting. And a lot of people don't do this. They just go, okay, VP analytics, VP this, these are the right titles. But like when you go deeper in this and you're really trying to build and piece all this together as to like, why would they be looking to hire or not hire, expand or not expand, or what exactly is it that they're looking for? And then thinking to yourself, because we don't always have a live stream to chit chat on, but you're thinking to yourself, like, how does this all play out? And what is the story? So this is what we're mapping it. We're planning and we're thinking about how we would retell this with the facts that we're identifying, and how do the facts correlate and align with each other, and how do they complement or not complement? What facts do I want to include in my future outreach? Because as you're building this out, you're of course taking all these notes as you're mapping it out and you're saving all of this, but you might not need all of it, or you actually might need all of it. So you're saving, you're thinking, you're building the story in your mind. What is the narrative as you're digging into all these different resources? So I just wanted to pause and kind of, because we're thinking about it, we're thinking it through, and we're bouncing it off of each other. But just wanted to call out that this is the fun part of prospecting. This is what makes sales fun, is you're putting your thinking cap on and you're investigating.
And I think the one part too is that the other part is like from like the segment level, And right now we've already dove to the account level, but you can do this. Like, I don't know if you guys have, oh shoot, what's it called? It's one of the ones you can pull SWOT analysis for industry, like industry verticals. Can't think we use it in investment banking all the time and the name's escaping me. But even just doing that, like what's happening, what are the trends in the industry? And then you could also look at like, how does this company compare on the benchmark of, are they doing better than their peers? Are they doing worse? Do they have more sellers in certain places? Like, I don't know if I can share while you're sharing. Let's see.
I love that.
Just killed it. That's fine. And while you pull that up, I mean, Melissa, I absolutely love that, because for me, I wholeheartedly agree that it's like the fun part of this. And so where Nick's head went was like, oh, where are they targeting and why? Where my head went was, they're probably trying to sell bigger deals and more complex products. And so they're trying to drive up that
Channel partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to find a way to basically sell chunkier, stickier deals. But with that, comes challenges, because everybody's trying to do that right now. Everybody's trying to find a way to throw an extra 2 or 3 things in the package that's going to make the value bigger, right? But the jolt effect, all that research has basically taught us that that's just going to drive up indecision in your mid-funnel opportunities. So yet another opportunity I have to think about what might resonate. If, say, message 1, message 2 doesn't resonate, maybe something about, losing mid-pipeline could potentially resonate as well. Because again, these long sales cycles, it's real easy for them to start to fall off, especially as budgets constrict as they have been over the past few months.
Absolutely.
I think that they're putting together channel partnerships with key implementation partners. And what they're doing is a product marketing play where they're trying to go and add structure to why people would buy it, and really focusing on their pricing and packaging for the different markets all over the world, connecting it to implementation partners. That's why they're getting a partner sales manager. And then I think then they're also doing customer engagement, because they're trying to go and reinforce that, because they're going after enterprise deals where there's more, and they probably have a movement where they don't have account management. They probably just have, CSMs. So they have a CSM, they have no account managers. So it's a pure net new versus retaining grows on a separate team. Reseller, they're trying to go and cut their CAC by having channel partners and playing on the different trusts in the market. Yeah. And then interesting alliances, business development. Yeah, they're going.
Help people understand what CAC is, because not everybody's going to pick up on that.
Customer acquisition costs. So the reason why I went through and looked at the jobs, and I was looking at and I went and referenced customer acquisition cost, is everybody's trying to go and find not necessarily a trick, they're trying to find their angle. And so I think their angle right now is because we're just a hard market to sell in right now. A lot of stuff that used to be a need to have is now a want. And what they want to have is revenue. And so they want to go and find it in a way that is the most easy based on distribution. And the easiest way to get distribution is to pay a little bit higher amount. I'm going to go and share your screen again, Geoff. Is a little higher amount to go and have access, because they're established layers of trust. And so I think what they're doing is they're trying to figure out those beachheads and core markets, and they're trying to go and figure out what is the right channel partnerships. And I think the reason why they invested in product and success is they're trying to set up their SOPs, their standard operating procedures, with pricing and packaging based on input and output. I would be very curious if they're going to be switching to a value-based pricing, or if they're going to do, what do you call it? A usage model. So kind of like HubSpot, where they have a base requirement, or if they're going to be, because I think that's why they're giving up money on the front end, is because they want to go and get usage on the back end, so it doesn't matter. But like Mel said, it's just to get this narrative out of your head, write it down, and instead of just assuming it's true, go and try and find it. And how long, Mel, doing this? We went a lot longer than I normally would, but how long would you spend on this?
Right. I think in the beginning, we talked about understanding like your map and understanding, we all said it, you need to know what you're looking for. So if you're just starting out, or you just joined a new company, you need to start mapping out what it is that you're looking for and getting into that flow of, I go on Glassdoor, I look at additional job searches, I put in these keywords on Google. Like, you get into this flow of what's working, but in the beginning, you're putting that process in place. So in the beginning, like, take time, really take time, spend an hour focusing on an account in the very beginning and figuring out what hits, what doesn't, what story you can put in place. But once you have it down, like, oh my God, everything gets so much faster, and you start to see the flags, like, okay, this is a flag, this is a flag, this is a flag. But if you're not seeing any of those flags, then, like I said early on, like, move on. So you start seeing these flags, and then you start putting the story together, and you have something that's very strong that now you can bring to your prospects, and you come at a level of credibility, especially when you're showing your research in the process, and you have something to validate it and lean back on and say, this is factual evidence that I've identified. Like, you are actually looking to hire all these people looking for this specific title, or looking to grow this specific department, or whatever it may be. So once you get in the motion of it, it should be really fast. That was a long response to saying keep it under 30 minutes, but just move, just you got to keep moving with it.
Fair. Yeah, I think actually, Geoff, where would you start? Because we had like 2 or 3 solid use cases, and I would say even like, assumptions of where they're prioritizing. If you had to pick like 1, 2, and 3, where would you start with this, with your account strategy?
And when you say like start with account strategy, are you thinking like which people or which roles would I start with?
Yeah, like if you had to just like in, like 5 minutes or so, kind of like walk through like next steps. So now you have this assumption written down. What would this look like in actual sales? Like as you like a jobs to be done for you.
Yeah. So I think there'd be like kind of 2 or 3 jobs to be done. So I would definitely make a, leadership lead list, so that I have in mind from CRO down, and I have an idea of how they structure. Because a lot of times you'll have leaders, VP of business unit 1, 2, and 3. I want to make sure I at least know who those people are, and I have them in the spot, and I'll find out like who the enablement folks are. I've got a couple core messages that are ready to go. And so I might think about whether I want to do some traditional outreach or not with those core messages based on my research. But that's probably not where I want to start. I actually probably want to start with engaging with some of the mid-level folks, be it directors or ICs, connecting with them on LinkedIn, running the blank connection request, and start to test out whether my hypothesis is accurate or not, and gather some intelligence there. That way I can start to understand before I actually do the outreach whether or not the stock messages that I have that I can personalize on top of are going to land or not land.
Well said. Mel, what about you? If you were taking this account through like the challenger lens, what would you do?
So, I mean, phase 1 is what's going on at the company and what you can identify at the company. And, it was a little bit different when I was selling customer experience, because I had a couple different departments that I could target based off of what was going on at the company. So if there was more of a marketing push, I can go more towards marketing. If it was more towards we need to help customer care, I'd go more towards customer care. So right now for me, as I'm selling payroll, and I'm it's international payroll, I first need to get an overall, what is the view of the company, and are they prioritizing expanding to international locations, or are they trying to hire a bunch of contractors? Are they looking for cheaper labor overseas? Like, what is the overall theme that I can identify from the account lens? And then that will dictate the type of, I guess, earthquake, I would say, that I would want to go after. So, okay, is it a sales? Is it a marketing? We used to call it just different plays. Like, this account is totally a marketing play. This account is totally like they are really struggling with payroll here. So once you get that overall theme, now you're planning out from how and who you would go after. Now I get a little dramatic. I do. Just because my style of outreach is through video. It is through a super sharp pointy hit that's very direct, and it's a little fierce, but it's direct in a sense of, once I start mapping out, okay, here are all the people who are experiencing this pain from all these different levels and these different types of pain from this one challenge, then understanding who is responsible for fixing it and who has actually done something about it in the past or has done something about it. I'm looking for that change maker that is feeling the impact, but is actually going to be the one who would either make the change, have that open mind, have something. So then once we get the account level, then we get into, here are our earthquake, and these are all the different people that I can kind of align, that I can go after. But which one out of these 10, 12 people is the person that I know will make an impact at this company because they've done it in the past, or they are experiencing this exact pain, or they literally said, I need to solve this somewhere, somehow. So once we're done mapping that whole thing out, it's taking that additional like individual look and trying to find a personal motive of all of those people that you've mapped out, and who's the best person for you to start to go and initiate these conversations with. That's just kind of how I get very, very broad to super specific to that one person, and they become my target for until I get a response, or until I know that they won't do anything, you know?
I love this. I love how, Geoff, how you laid out how you would tackle it. I like, Mel, how you laid out how you tackle it. And it's interesting because I would say I'm a blend of the two as well, because what I would highlight as my three functions is it would either be marketing, partnerships, or sales. And I would want to know which is the biggest priority and in what order, for lack of better terms, will shit flow downhill. Because if one doesn't work, who's going to get blamed? Because channel partnerships nobody's going to want to go and partner with this company other than they just pay an outrageous amount of money for, cuts, if marketing isn't building a strong brand and creating demand for it already. So they were hiring copywriters. Is that because they're doing ads and already doing spend? So how are they prioritizing? What does this look like out in the real world? From their channel partners, what is their existing relationships with these implementation partners? Are they already delivering on this? Is this all brand new? Is this like a brand new motion? And then on sales, how is it actually working? What are their list building and prioritization filters? Do they know specifically who they're targeting with this? If not, then the biggest scapegoat of this whole thing is probably them, because they're getting blamed for lack of pipeline, not channel partners, not marketing. And so what I would do with my initial piece is I want to know, who can I get promoted and who can I get their head above water? And then once I do that and they feel like life is okay, then it's who do they report to and who can we go and climb the ladder with, that mobilizer. And as Geoff knows all too well, what is the commercial insight? What is that piece that once they know, they can't unknow? And if this is a big enough account, I'll actually create a 30-day content nurture of key themes that I see that aren't just necessarily just unique to them, but unique to those three different areas. And that'll be my content for the week of how it shows up in their life. So as I'm running my blank connection requests, I'm nurturing in them and I'm helping them be masters of their craft, to own their jobs, to get promoted, to get better. And then that way I can do it at scale, because I truly believe that birds of a feather flock together.
You guys really are so good at social, like everything about it, just the whole campaign around it. And it's true, because as you're adding to your network, the people that they're going to be looking at what it is that you're posting or sharing about or even talking about. It might not be what you're actually posting about, but if you're in groups on LinkedIn that are similar to it, they're seeing that content as well. So for you to take that additional step and to actually make a nurture campaign on socials and what you're sharing and posting about is really, really deep.
Thank you. I means a lot. We've all worked with marketing teams that we didn't feel like we're, measuring up to or aligning with what we're doing. And so sometimes it's nice to be able to go and say, hey, look what if you guys wouldn't put some money behind this and help me, think how much better this would be. Any parting words? I just realized that we're at time. Is there anything that you would like to? Yeah, I know it went really fast. Hey, we'll have to do this again. This was fun. But is there anything that you guys would like to leave as like that icing on the cake for sellers maybe that have never done this before and they're just starting? What would be your parting words to them?
I can go. I'll go first. This is what's going to separate the reps. And maybe it's not this exact, you don't have to follow this exact formula, but the reps that are taking an approach of really understanding the account, the story, the narrative, what is the pain, and just being able to build that out and then explain that to a prospect, now that's creating demand. Like that's a whole because you're essentially, not everyone's going to sit there and be so reflective of their own operations and be like, wow, I need to fix these things. You're the person who's coming in with all the information that you've developed and said, this is the big problem and all the people who are experiencing this. Like it's almost like a wake-up call in a sense to your prospects. That's creating demand. Those are the sellers that are going to stand out during this time. If you are just servicing demand, there's not a lot of demand right now to service, but if you are just servicing demand, you are not, feeding this model. So be different, build it out, and it's fun, especially when you get your hypothesis right. And they're
it feels so
oh,
good.
Yeah. They're like, you're right. You're like, how'd you know? And you're like, I am a magician. So that's my 2 cents. As we wrap up, I'll pass it back.
I love that.
Geoff.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to Melissa's point of like, it's okay to take a little time to experiment. It's okay to, if you're going after enterprise sales, like doing a lot of stuff, you can be busy, but you're not going to be effective. And so, you can get to the point where you can recognize some patterns, but it's going to take a little while, and you need to be a little bit more patient. That's why I love, it's okay to gather some information at the mid-level of the organization, folks who cannot make the decision, but can help you with that hypothesis so that you look a lot better when you do finally do outreach to the decision makers. I personally experimented with all kinds of things over the last few years, and I can tell you it's a lot more effective to do quality and find a process that you can make repeatable than anything else.
I could not agree more. I think the only thing I would add is always be learning. If you're not learning something about the account, not learning something about yourself, not learning something about the industry while you're doing outreach, you're probably not selling your marketing. And I wouldn't necessarily put that as the good kind of marketing. It would probably get put under as spam. So benchmark, know your numbers, see if you're getting better or worse, because that's how you run experiments and know what's working, what's not. And always be learning, and you will never lose over the long run. Well, thank you, you two. My goodness, was this an incredible show. We'll have to do it again. And all your brilliant insights. I know you guys are going to get lots of connection requests and DMs from this one. And yeah, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you guys in the DMs and all your new posts.
Good.
Of course.
Happy Friday.
Everyone. Yes, happy Friday.
Happy Friday.